Good evening, everyone. Okay, sorry. So, good evening, guys. Warm welcome to this fourth session of Hacktober Fest. So, in this session, we have Mr. Harisudan, who works as an information security analyst at FIS Global, and he is taking a session on the topic red teaming 101. So, I hope that you will be getting enough knowledge in the field of red teaming and all those stuff. So, I invite Mr. Harisudan to take away the class. Sir, you can just talk up, do the presentation and
Yeah, let me start by sharing my screen.
yes, sir, it's possible.
Yeah. So before getting started, like, is my screen and voice is audible, right? Like, is my screen is visible and my voice is audible, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, cool. So good evening, all. So it's been great to meet you all in this meet. So before getting started, like I just, it's been a honor to be meet you all for this event hosted by Cyberonics. So today we just going to explore what is red teaming and what are all the basic stuffs, how actually the red teaming has been working around us. Okay, so this is a totally a basic stuff. So if you are a beginner or if you are new to this specific field, so it would be more helpful for you. Let's get started. So before starting, myself, Harisudan, working as a SOC analyst at FIS Global. So basically a cybersecurity aspirant, like looking forward to explore more stuff on the field of cybersecurity, and a part-time blogger at a SOC investigations. So and more passionated into a red and blue teaming stuff. Okay, so vice versa, nothing more than that. So let's start it. So as I said, this is a beginning, it's a beginner friendly uh, presentation. So I just covered majorly how the red teaming, what is actually the red teaming, and what are all the basic components, like what are all the major components which has been engaged in red team assessment, and what is actually the red team life cycles are, and finally we're just going to conclude by seeing what is mitre attack. So this is all we are going to cover in this session. So at the end of this session, you may have a clear understanding about what is red teaming and what is the difference between a pen testing and red teaming, how red teaming is actually engaged in, and terms you can be expected in this end of the session. So yeah, so introduction. So it is a myth, like, okay, like for example, many of us got confused in this specific term, like what is red team engagements and what is pen testing. Okay, so first and foremost, red team engagement are not an offensive technique. So it's not about compromising some system, it's not about hacking. Okay, so basically it's not an offensive technique. It's a process of recreating or stimulating in real world cyber attacks to determine or observe various types of vulnerability exist in an organization. So it's like recreating that entire attack scenario and understanding and observing its vulnerabilities. For example, so a company A has been got compromised with one APT. Okay, so let us consider a company A has been compromised by one attacker group. So I am running some B organization. Okay, so how I can prevent that specific attack from that attack in my organization? So for that SOC pen testing, for that we need an advanced engagements technique. So actually in cybersecurity, as we already know, there are many SOC teams, pen testing teams, threat intel, threat hunting are there. But on recent trends, we can see multiple threat actors has been engaged in some proactive exploit. So we need some advanced engagements, right? So the one and only solutions was red team engagements. So as I said, the A organization has been compromised. So how I can prevent my organization from this specific attack? So I need to engage myself on that specific attack. So I need to assess my organization. I need to recreate that specific attack techniques in my organization and determine that what are all the loopholes the attackers are using, and I can explicitly provide some preventive mechanism on that. So this is what the red team engagement is. So it's not based on offensive, like as I said, like it's not totally based on an offensive technique. It's a part. It's by engaging in offensive technique, we're going to defend the organization. That's it. To be simpler, we are engaging in some offensive techniques to prevent from a cyber attacks. That's it. Yeah, we can move forward. So what are all the main objective of red team engagement? So the first and foremost is assessing your infrastructure. So process of assessing and validating organization infrastructure. It's not a precise technique. So we are not going to concentrate only on web-based vulnerability or network-based vulnerability. It's going to target our entire organization from the beginning till the end, from the web server to the domain controller. So we are going to assess every part of the organization. Is there like assessing in the stuff, like we are going to exploit it. We are going to exploit in an offensive way. Like for example, in my organization B, there is a 10 routers and 2 web servers. So I going to keep on engaging in some offensive activity. Like I can try various attacks, various vulnerabilities in that. So if there is any loophole, I need to determine, is that specific web server or is there any network component that's been more offensive on, it's vulnerable for that attack. So the first and foremost objective of red team engagement is assessing your infrastructure. Second, evaluating your security control. So security controls are became mandatory on every organization. If it is a small scale organization, intermediate scale organization, or huge scale organization, every organization it's going to have some basic security controls like firewall, IDS, IPS, and etc. So there are multiple security controls. You can have you can take any security controls. So we're going to evaluate whether the security controls has been implemented properly. Is there any misconfiguration? So we need to evaluate that security control by using some offensive engagement. That's what the second objective of red teaming is. And the third and final most important objective is to stimulate an attack. Okay, so this is what the actual goal of red teaming. So we are going to recreate the attack scenario to determine its impact. That's what the main objective. So these are all the three major objectives you can expect from red teaming. So these three is three main objective. Move forward. Okay. So we need some prerequisite. Okay. So we can't simply, or we can't even jump into a red teaming concept directly. So we need some knowledge about what is organization is, what is the organization infrastructure is. Okay. So these are all four major division. Okay, so if it is an organization, you can take, like as I said, like if I'm mentioning organization, it can be anything, small, medium, huge scale organization, it can be. Okay, so these four components are being mandatory in that stuff. So we can find some hardware components, we can find some network components, we can find some software components, and latestly every organization has been moving to a cloud based technology. Okay, so hardware in the sense, it can be any stuff. So we can take a computer, a server, any physical device. So in an organization, it is present there. Okay. So the software. So it's like Office products or Jenkins. It can be any software. Network based like routers, switch hub. These are all the basic infrastructure which has been. These are all basic components which has been required to build an organization infrastructure. Okay, so why we need to learn about organization infrastructure? If someone has raised some question, so this is what. So let us assume this is as a sample organization. Okay, so if it is an organization, you can clearly see there is some domain controllers. We can skip that. Okay, there are some hardware components like servers, computer, routers, firewall, and the cloud infrastructure. So getting into an organization, it's not an easy. Okay, so it is a most complex part of red teaming or pen testing is initial access. Okay, So we can't easily get an initial access in any of infrastructure or any of organization. So it's the most challenging part of assessment, or if it is a, even if it is a malicious way, if it is a legit way, so it is not to be not as a easy way to get intrude into an organization. Okay, so for example, if I'm planning to get included in an organization, let us say like if I'm a red team assessor, like I need to get into an organization B. Okay, so before entering it, I know what are all the entry point in an organization. Okay, so that's the main reason we need to know about the infrastructure. Okay, so these four components are the major entry point in an organization. Okay, so I can discover some vulnerabilities on hardware based application, or I can discover some vulnerabilities on network based application, or I can discover some vulnerabilities on software based application, or I can directly intrude by exploiting the cloud services, and I can easily get included in an organization. These are all the four major entry points. Okay, like any attacks, like for example, if you like if you take any examples. Okay, like if I'm, for example, if I'm targeting a web server. Okay, so it's basically a hardware based, like I'm directly targeting a web server. Or for example, if I'm targeting a Apache based vulnerability. Okay, there is one Apache based vulnerability, so in that I can take a reversal, or I can take a bind shell. These kind of activity are based on software based vulnerability. So these four categories are the major entry point to get into an organization. So that's what the main key factor to understand what are all the organization infrastructures are. So yeah, that's why I'm just here to explain it. So these are all, like I can, like I'm just pointing out, so I can compromise one of the vulnerabilities on office product, so I can get into get compromise the specific computer, and I can move laterally. Okay, or I can directly target this router. So if the product they are using, like if the router product has been vulnerable for any attack, so I can directly target it, and I can get included in it. And if there is some misconfiguration on cloud based infrastructure, so I can compromise any one of their account, like they can be anything, AWS, Azure, or GCP. So I can directly compromise it, and I can get intrude into our internal network. So these are all the four entry points which a red team assessment can be targeted. Okay, so these are all major, like I'm just classified it majorly. Yeah, this is what the important point is. What is the difference between penetration testing and a red team engagement? Okay, penetration testing and red team engagement are generally not an offensive approach. Okay, first and foremost, we need to be clear, it's not an offensive approach. It's a process of validating an infrastructure to determine its misconfiguration or vulnerability. To be frank, pen testing or red team engagement is to determine what are all the vulnerabilities are being present in that organization, and what are all the misconfiguration are being present in the organization. We are going to determine by using some multiple approaches. That's it. Huh? Based on the scope, process, and technique, it has been divided. Okay, for example, I'm just giving a differentiator. So what is, like, these scope, process, and techniques has been differentiated. These two techniques, or the difference between pen testing and red team engagement. Yeah, pen testing. What we actually do in pen testing is we have a limited scope. For example, if I am a pen tester, I got a very limited scope to be assessed. Okay, for example, we got a like we can only target a web server only. Like for example, targeting a limited scope, or targeting a limited process, like I can only target one or two devices. So these are all my scope, these are all my limitation in pen testing. And um, and basically pen testing is to identify and exploit this vulnerability. For example, if one CV is released for we all know there are two major CVs on Microsoft Exchange server. So as a job of pen tester, I will try to recreate that, like try to exploit that CV, and whether, like, to determine whether the CV is working in my organization or not. So identifying and exploiting a predetermined vulnerability. I don't need to find a new pathway for an exploit. So I always use a predefined vulnerability. That's the second point. And third, it's always a map scan and exploit. Okay, so we always do a reconnaissance, and we always do some, if there is any vulnerability, we do an exploitation. That's it. That's the limit of pen testing. So Like it is a reality. For example, if there is a one web server, I usually run some nmap scan or zenmap scan or using some metasploit payload to determine its vulnerability. This is what the scope is. We prepare some report and submit to our submit, or we can do some bug bounty. That's it. That's what the limitation of pen testing it. And there is very limited action. So for example, I just showing that infrastructure. If you are a pen tester, you got only access to the domain database server, and you got we you need to submit what are all the vulnerabilities are been existing in the database server. That's it. That's the limited scope. You can't even assess the entire infrastructure. You got a single, you got a very small part on that organization. That's the main part of pen testing. And now we move to red teaming. Okay, red teaming is basically, as I mentioned, red teaming is basically a realistic simulated attack. So it's, the scope is not limited. Okay, so due to that realistic simulated attack, we can't limit our scope. We need an entire access. Okay, second, it's totally work on tactic, techniques and procedure. Sorry, so it's totally consists of three major parts: tactics, techniques and procedure. Okay, I'm explaining this tactic, technique, procedure in a separate slide in a detailed way. So let's move to that evasion, escalation and persistent. It always comes under evasion, escalation and persistent. Without these three major components, a red team engagement can't be happen. So these are all the three main pillars of red teaming, we can say. Okay, and providing an insight over an entire infrastructure. So this is the major difference between a pen testing and a red teaming. So in pen testing, we have a limited scope. We're going to exploit the predefined vulnerability, and we're going to determine. We are going to generate a report based on that. But in red team assessment, it's totally a different way. We are going to stimulate and realistic attack. We are going to use some advanced technique like evasion, escalation and persistent, and we are going to provide an insight over an entire infrastructure. So as I mentioned, so if you are pen tester, you will assess only a database server. If you are a red teamer, you will assess the entire infrastructure. You even assess a cloud based. You can investigate based on cloud. You can investigate based on network. You can investigate based on server, system, domain controller, anything. So that's the scope is not limited in red teaming. Okay, so I hope like you may get the clarification, like what is the major difference between pen testing and red teaming. So okay, so like I'm mentioning, if you have any doubts, just paste in a chat. So I will be look after at the end of the session. So I try to clarify that. Okay. So you may ask how to become a red team. Red team member, or how to get a job on red teaming. Okay, so it's not an easy way. So it's not like learning some multiple stuff and we can easily get a red teaming job. It's not. Okay, so first we need a knowledge of networking. Okay, and we need to have a working experience on SOC. And third, you need to have a experience on threat hunting and threat intel. Okay, and fourth, you need to have a experience on incident response. And fifth is the forensics. And the ultimate goal is, and ultimate and the topmost of the job cycle is a red team engagement. Okay, why I'm saying is, like I just mentioned some multiple techniques. Like it is not easy to replicate. Like deploying some evasion or create or moving some escalation or deploying some persistent. It's not an easy job. You need to have a working experience of SOC. You need to have a working experience how the threat hunting is working and how the incident response is responding to an incident and how forensics team are investigating. And finally, you can do a red team engagement, because you need to know every pros and cons of every level. So if you can't directly jump into a red teaming part, it's a step-by-step process. First, you need to master yourself on networking and security operations. And I just missed the pen testing part here. So security operation and pen testing, you need to have a well understanding of threat hunting, incident response and forensics. And finally, you will definitely, if you're master in the below four, like networking, SOC, threat intel, you will definitely have a ultimate knowledge on red team engagements. Okay, so I just giving you a best example for a red team red teaming, how the attack is happening, how red teamers are more useful in an organization. Okay, so let us take a recent breach. We are all more familiar with this Uber breach. It has been happens around, I guess, last month. Okay, so how it's happened? Okay, we already know, like it's been the attacker use them like. The attacker group used some social engineering techniques to gather the VPN credential, and they got access to internal infrastructure, and they just scanned their entire infrastructure, and they got access to multiple domains, and they got access to a shared drive, and they just dump every credentials, and they got a ultimate control on the Uber infrastructure. Okay, so this is what an life cycle of an attack. Okay, so in this, the attacker is not limit their scope. Okay, so the attacker not stop their attack on gathering a VPN credential. They just move forward, they just expand their scope, they just plan to compromise the entire organization. Okay, so this is the attack part. Okay, so as a red team engager, as a red team member, what can I do to prevent this specific attack in my organization? Okay, so for that, first I need to assess my organization. So if I am a owner of organization B, I need to replicate the specific attack scenario in my organization. So I need to do some social, like I can set up a team of red teamers and ask them to do the same way, like how the breaches happen, so we can replicate the same way whether this specific attack can happen in our organization. So that's the ultimate goal of red teamers. So they just recruit a group of persons, and they do a uh, specifically do this specific task. Okay, by replicating the attack. So they actually replicate the same process in their organization, and they provide a final report. Okay, whether this specific breach can happen in our organization or not. They can point out multiple mistakes. Okay, in our organization, it can be they can easily access the internal network, or the employees are being more vulnerable for social engineering. So they can collect every record, and they can develop their security team. That's it. It's not about offensive part. It's about doing some offensive to gather the defensive. That's the cyclist. Okay, so I'm just doing some offensive technique to replicate this attack and determine what are all the negatives and what are all the vulnerabilities which can be overcome in our organization to prevent this specific attack. That's what the ultimate target of red teaming. So I hope you will be more clear on this specific concepts on red team. So I just moving forward on red team components. And you may ask, like for example, if a pen tester, you need to have a skills on web-based techniques, right? Like you need to be familiar with the top 10 OWASP. Like you need to have a working knowledge on every top 10 OWASP, like every attack, every web-based
Yes,
attack.
sir.
Sorry. Okay, so you need to have a working knowledge on web-based exploit, yeah, or pen testing concepts. Okay, what are all the prerequisites for red teaming? Okay, so these four major components are being more mandatory on red team engagement. You need to have an ultimate knowledge on Active Directory. You need to have an ultimate knowledge on escalation, evasion, and persistent. You need to know about what are all the C2s and how the C2s are working. And you need to be masters on custom tools and custom scripts. So we can't trust that predefined tools. Like I'm like I can't like if you said like I can use Nmap for scanning, it's not going to work. That's the reality. Okay, so you need to you need to custom create your own tool. That these are all the major parts of red team. If you are master this specific component, you can ultimately become a red teamer, but it's take too much time than you expect. Okay, so Active Directory, I'm just giving a glance about what is it and how it's work. Okay, so Active Directory is generally a directory services designed by Microsoft. So till 2022, 99% of organization has been working with Active Directory. Okay, so in their infrastructure, definitely they just implemented the Active Directory concept. So why the Active Directory implemented, if you ask? Like it's a centralized configuration and management machine. So I can configure the entire infrastructure with this Active Directory. I can create a system. I can give the specific access to the system. These kind of privileges has been added on this Active Directory. Yeah, as I mentioned, it is allowed to control and monitor the entire user activity across the organization. That's the main benefit of Active Directory. It has been like a 99% or we can say 9 companies has been using Active Directory. Okay. What are all the Active Directory components? Okay. So these 6 components are being majorly used across Active Directory. There is a domain controller, forest, domain, user group, trust policy, and domain services. These are all the major and regularly used component. Without this component, like if I can't skip this component, I can't skip any one of the component in Active Directory. So let's start with domain controller. Domain controller. So this is what the key heart of Active Directory. For example, if I am got in an organization, so ultimate target of an adversaries or red team is to get access to the domain controller. Okay, because it's a centralized controlling event. If I got access to a domain controller, I can do anything. Okay, I just showing you how the domain controller looks, what are all the components inside that domain controller. Okay, and the second is a forest. Okay, it's a collection of multiple domains. In an organization, it can be a multiple domains. For example, it can be a test domain in the sense they have a separate groups for developers, testers. Each group has its own access rights. Okay, so these are all considered as a domains. Forest in the sense it's a collection of domain. Okay, for example, I have two distinct domain controller, so I can link as a forest. So these are all be represented with the forestry, this kind of hierarchy. Okay, domain in the sense it generally manage a group and object. So I just showing you practical domains, like practical visibility on this specific domain. So organization unit is it's consists of that computers, printers, scanners, what are all the devices which has been connected in AD component has been considered as organizational unit. And object in the sense like it's contain like organization unit with the means like it can implement some policies. Object in the sense it's the computers, user, groups, printer, everything falls under the object. This is a typical example for how the Active Directory environment is. So we have a domain called abc.com with a domain controller. So it has multiple subdomains. For example, like developer.abc.com, tester.abc.com, admin.abc.com, which are all be organization unit. So in an organization unit, it consists of multiple objects. It can be they consist of n number of PCs, printers, users, and in a tester domain there is a multiple PCs. It's continue. Okay, so these are all the major difference. For example, if any of a new member is joining in this ABC company, they will directly add in this specific organization group. They get an access because they predefine what are all the access need to be included in an organization unit. So if some user is added, they got this specific access and they can do their regular job. This is how the typical Active Directory environment works. So why I am pushing more in that Active Directory concept is because if you are not familiar with this working of an internal infrastructure, it is too hard to escalate your privilege or you getting intruded in an organization. It's been too complicated without an actual understanding in an internal infrastructure. And we can continue with that AD component. And there is a two specific, two major components, users and groups. Users are the group inside a AD Active Directory. For example, a user can be in an ABC organization got a specific ID which falls under the same domain. Okay, so by default in domain controller there are two users. Okay, so if you are a domain admin, you can typically see there are two major users, administrator and guest user. Okay, and if you are a system user, for example, if you have your organization asset, there are four main section, four main user classification. You can have a domain admin, service account, local admin, and domain user. Okay, these are all the four different users. So for example, domain admins are the owner of a domain controller. The domain admin can access the actual domain controller, the ultimate power in an organization. Service account, okay, service account has been used for typically for accessing some services. For example, there can be a SQL server, Jenkins. There are multiple services has been hosted across the organization. So this specific account has been created to access the specific services. For example, if there is an vulnerability on Jenkins, okay, so if you have successfully compromised one of the organization user service account, you can easily exploit the Jenkins vulnerability and you can escalate your privilege. That's why this user classification is more important. Okay, so if you got a domain admin, you don't need to care about anything because it's ultimate power. So if your approach is based on that service based exploitation, you need to target the service account. If you are a local admin in the sense, like as we already know, in our system there are two accounts. One is a normal unprivileged user and the second is a privileged user. For example, in typically in Linux, if you are using SU, like you got a root access, right? That's what the local admin is. It's a high privilege user. He can run, he can turn off, he can do anything. So this is what the second is, and the third is domain user. These are all the regular user. If you are if you are daily login to an organization, you got with the domain user. So user classification, user group are more. You need to be more aware of this component. That's what, like if you are targeting, like for example, today there might be some there might be some CVEs on Jenkins. So that the ABC company is using the Jenkins. Okay, so you need to target the users. The user has a service account. Okay, so then you can compromise that Jenkins vulnerability and you can escalate your privilege. Okay, that's why this specific user classification is more important. Okay, let's move forward. The final and most part was to trust policy domain services. Okay, so in Active Directory, the trust and policies domain services are also an important part. You need to know about bits and bytes of Active Directory. Okay, so policy is used to provide some restrictions. So I guess there are many restrictions we can apply in Active Directory. So I can block the right click. I can even block a left click. I can apply the user content. There are members of Active Directory. Domain in this domain services in the sense, there are four, like these are all the four major domain services. There are multiple domain services, but these four are majorly used. The first and foremost is domain services, like it's used to map the entire domain. Second is certificate services. If you are more familiar with digital signature or these kind of stuff, these services has been majorly used. And federation services, right management services. To be frank, I'm not aware of these two services, but there is authentication services too. In this, you can see there are multiple NTLM, Kerberos. There are multiple authentication techniques also present there. So these are all the major components of Active Directory. Okay, you need to know every part to get into an organization, or you will get familiar how, if I got an initial access, how I can move forward. This is why the Active Directory is. We need a good understanding of Active Directory, because as I said, 95 till now 95% there is no replacement for this Active Directory. Okay, still now many companies are using this Active Directory. That's the main factors. So before starting to C2, I just showing how the domain controller might look. I just up and running one of the domain services. So it is not a big difference. Okay, so these Windows, like if you are download and install a Windows Server iOS, like ISO file on your host machine, it became a server. Okay, that's the major difference. It's not a different hardware component. It's just a OS operating system which has a server management. That's it. Sorry, it takes some time. So till now, I hope you're clear with that. Why the Active Directory is more important on red teaming, because it is a ultimate responsibility to do Active Directory based pen testing or assessment. It is a mandatory. If you are a red teamer or if you are targeting to become a red teamer, you need to have ultimate knowledge on Active Directory components. It's a mandatory skill. Yeah. So if you're looking to a domain controller, this is how the domain controller look. It look like a normal Windows operating system, but it has a server management console in it. That's the ultimate difference. It takes some time because it consumes lots of resources, so that's why. Sorry for the delay. Okay, this is what the controller is. We can see the domain controller has this specific management called server manager. Okay, so in this specific section you can do anything. You can control the entire organization. So you can have a specific dashboard. You can manage every component in this. We can add a role feature, remove roles, add servers. We can do anything. This is the ultimate thing you need to be compromised. Okay, so I'm just going to Active Directory Administrative Center. Administrator Center. If you're deep looking into it, you got ultimate access to anything, but it requires like we can access the DNS server, we can configure the DNS server, like it's like ultimate power. Okay, so for example, this is the domain. Okay, I just created some MSec local. So if you're opening, like if you're managing this specific domain, so you can see. Yeah, Active Directory user and computer. You can see what are all the workstation has been connected in this domain, and what are all the domain controllers. What are all like this is what the ultimate control. I can easily remove this specific computer using single click. Okay, the big if you got an access. Okay, so it's not a easy, but if you got an access, you can easily control the entire organization. Okay, this is how the Active Directory works. So I hope you will get a clear picture on it, how the domain controller look. So I'm just talking about this component, domain controller, the abc.com. If you got access, like I'm just opening a console like this. So in every organization it has a console like this. So if I compromise this specific domain, I can add, remove any of the components in an organization. That's the ultimate power. Okay. I said like we need to compromise it one by one. So if I compromise a computer to correct, I can't even celebrate after compromising one system because we need to take down the entire network. So in that case, we can't take a shell on each and every computer. It's become more suspicious. So it is like there is a specific topic called command and sense. These are all the 5 majorly used command and control. Mythic. So Mythic is recently very famous command and control. It's a cross-platform. You can use it on multiple platforms like Mac, Linux, or Windows, or you can target multiple operating system using Mythic. Merlin is a CLI tool. Okay, it's basically a command line tool. You can generate a exploit. You can create a payload and you can target the end system. Covenant is also a .NET based. It's basically a Windows based C2 server. Cobalt Strike is a professional tool, so it's not expected to try because it's too costly. It's a tool. Calidra is it's also it's a tool by Maitre, so it's also a based tool. Okay. In this system, it has been pre-installed with the Covenant. Okay, so opening it. So in this model, I'm just showing about Covenant. Okay, you got a console which can operate anything. It's like that. Okay, so listener generally. If you are more familiar, if you are more working with the Metasploit, okay, we also create a listening port, listening host to listen what are all the activities. So it is mandatory to create a listener port and launcher. Okay, this is the major part of this command and control. So I can create any payloads. For example, I can create a PowerShell based payloads. I can create a shellcode based payload. I can even create a binary. For example, executables. So executables, WMIC. I can create any of the payloads on this service. Okay, I can create like if I'm compromised one of the system, it has the user has access to a WMI, so I can use this specific WMI based payload to get a reverse shell, to get a shell on that. Okay, so grants in the sense if you have compromised one of the system, you can have access in it. Okay, so you display the host name, user, what are the process, what is the status, whether it's active or inactive. Task in the sense after you are getting access, you can do multiple tasks. These are all the custom created tasks which has been targeting specific services. It's a system DLL system.dll, system management.dll. There are multiple DLL which we can customizedly create this specific malicious crafted DML to exploit that specific system. So these are all some predefined tasks. You can also create your own. You can also create and upload your location. So it's automatically added in this task. So this is a predefined task which has been executed. So graph in the sense you will get a clear graph. So for example, if you're compromise one system, it represents in a graphical way. So data you can like in this data you can see what are all the password credential, hashes, ticket credential, what are all we got download in this. So these are all some previously exploited stuff. Uh, here you can get a credential or hash in multiple stuff. In user detail, you can see what are all the user has been compromised and what are all the states. Okay, so in this specific dashboard, you can control anything. You can develop, you can create a custom script, you can directly deploy in the target machine. You can do multiple stuff. That's the ultimate target of C2C is. Okay, as a red teamer, it is an ultimate duty to know more about command and control. Okay, so let's move forward. Due to the time constraint, I'm not doing a practical stuff. Sorry. Yeah, the third major part is escalation, evasion, and persistent. Okay, these are all the key factors. Okay, for example, there is one weakness in that ABC company. I get a successful access into it, but without this component, you can't stay more than a minute. Okay, you need to have some specific crafted techniques based on this escalation, evasion, and persistent. You need to pre-plan that. Okay, so escalation, you already more familiar with privilege escalation. We need to escalate to a higher privilege. Okay, So that's the ultimate target of escalation. Second is evasion. So it's not easy in a modern day to deploy some payloads or running some malicious command in an organization, because there are multiple security controls, like firewall is watching us, there are IDS IPS is watching that, there are multiple security controls keep on watching the entire organization. So we need a special evasion techniques to evade all the security components. And third is you need to have a connect to persistent with the victim machine. These are all the three main components required. So escalation, as I said, like you are all more familiar with it, can be like if I compromise for, this is what the escalation is. If I got a access of a user account, okay, so sorry, yeah, if I got access to a domain user, I need to escalate my access to a local admin, and I need to escalate my access to a domain admin. So these privilege escalation can be happen on host based vulnerability or services based vulnerability. There are many predefined vulnerabilities for available on based for privilege escalation. So it can be happen from misconfiguration or vulnerability. Okay, so evasion. Okay, evasion is, it's too hard than you expect. Okay, for example, if you have opened your PowerShell command, PowerShell terminal, and if you type invoke, if you are intended to type some malicious command, okay, okay, sorry, okay. So I hope mostly you are familiar with Mimikatz. Okay, it's a post exploitation tool used for Active Directory attack. So if I'm typing invoke Mimikatz in my host machine, okay, so I'm just simply typing invoke Mimikatz. I don't have a tool of Mimikatz. I don't have a package of Mimikatz. If I type this specific command, what is the result we are getting? Okay, the script contains malicious content and has been blocked by your antivirus software. Okay, in even in an enterprise machine, okay, it's not connected to any Active Directory. It's a computer, it's a personal laptop. Okay, even in personal laptop, the uh, predefined antivirus is not allowed to type the invoke Mimikatz, because it became more secure. We can't even get access, and we can't type, we can easily open a shell, we can directly type invoke Mimikatz. Okay, there are multiple restrictions, you need to bypass every evasions. Okay, evasion is more complicated. You need to custom create your payloads to evade every technique. I just showing one of the technique. Okay, I just opening again that. Okay, for example, okay, just opening CD. Right now I'm just creating on payloads. Okay, for example, I just using, I just temporarily creating some Linux payload. Okay. Sorry. Seco, sorry. IP. Okay. Okay. Like I'm just creating a basic payload. Okay. Yeah. So this is what the payload is. Okay. So for example, if you see, this is a payload. So if I'm specifically type this specific payload in my terminal, it got detected. It got easily detected by the internal antivirus itself. So how I can create a evasion? Okay. So it's ultimately going to be a hashing or encryption. Okay. For example, I'm just using this command prompt. So I'm just generating some payloads. This is an like okay. I just copied on PowerShell payload in a C2 server. Uh, this is how the payload looks. Like don't confuse with that words. So this is the suspicious payload to get a reversal with that in a Windows environment. So if I'm executed this specific PowerShell script on a Windows, it get a reversal in this command and control. This is the example. So I just pasting this specific PowerShell script. Okay, or I have a previous. Okay, so okay, no, we can go with that PowerShell itself. Okay, so I just saving this specific command, and if I using some I don't know whether it's internet connected. So I just uploading a specific file sample. So it can be easily detected. You can see many antivirus has been detecting this as a suspicious. So ultimately this specific script can't even download in any of the organization because it's been even detecting on virus total. So how I can avoid this specific task? Okay, so I just using a simple encoding. Okay, for example, I'm just doing some basic encoding. So this is what the encoded content is. Okay, so I just now copying the encoded content. I just replacing that command with the encoded stuff. So now it's been encoded. Okay, the entire PowerShell has been encoded. I'm just saving it. Now see, now it's been detecting. I'm to not sure whether let's check whether it's detecting or not. So you can clearly see many antivirus scan has been now been undetected because of this specific encryption. So you need to use these types of evasion techniques, like comparative to previous technique. One or two high reputed antivirus has been detected because of this specific command. You can see the PowerShell stat Windows. Even if you are encrypt this, many antivirus does not detect it. You can see comparative, we detect more than 7 antivirus product there, but now we can see most of the antivirus has been undetected. So these are all some basic evasion. This is not a pro stuff. This is a basic evasion techniques used to evade some security controls. Okay. So persistent. It is a more tough job to get connected with the victim machine. So you need to use some multiple techniques to get connected with the victim machine. This is what the persistent state. These three pillars has been more complicated. So that's why it's required as extra steps to do the steps. Okay. So custom tools and script, as I said, like we can't use the we can't easily use that predefined commands. If I'm using some pre-developed command like mimikatz is more famous on AD based enumeration, so I can't like be the basic operating system is being used for block listing these kind of command. So you need to develop with the custom script, custom tools and script to evade this specific types of detection. And the third, let us move to the third quickly. So red team life cycle. Okay. So it is more different than the cyber kill chain. If you are more familiar with cyber kill chain, you can see there is a reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, and C2, and there is a action, command and action on object. Sorry. So these are all the life cycle of cyber kill chain, but there is a different stage on red team life cycle. So initially, you like as starters, we need to do some recon, and we need to initially compromise one of the victim, and we need to establish a persistent, and we need to escalate our privilege, and we need to further done some internal recon using the active directory. What are all the services are there, what are all the policy, what are all the groups there. We need to do the internal recon, and you need to laterally move, like moving from one system to another system. You need to do some data analysis. What are all the system has been considered as a more precious one, and what are all or been more less sensitive data. What are all the system consist of less sensitive data, and finally you need to exfiltrate the sensitive data to your system. This is the entire red team life cycle. Okay. So if you're like, you can take a reference from that syntric.com. So they have mentioned it in a detailed way. Yeah. So in a point of red teamer, so this is how the infrastructure is. Okay. So this is how the infrastructure. We have a publicly accessible web servers. We have internal systems like developer system, admin system, and there is a domain controller. This specific section has been considered as a demilitarized zone. So we can easily bypass and we can easily access this specific resource using this specific resource. It has been isolated from other system to give more protective measures. So first, as I said, like first you need to compromise these web servers, you need to do some web-based pen testing, and if there is any vulnerability, you need to compromise this web server, and you need to evade this firewall, and you need to compromise one of the users in the developer group, and you need to evade further detection, and you need to laterally move to a next admin group, and you need to do some internal recon, and you need to escalate your privilege to access the domain controller. So these are all the steps has been included in red team assessment. Not like, as I said, it's not a precise scope. The scope has been more ultimate comparative to red team. Yeah, final and fourth most was Mitre. Already the time is over. Like, let me finish it quick. So Mitre. So we don't like many things, like it is more easy to define. This is the red team process, and there is a specific framework which going to explain in a detailed way. It's named as Mitre attack framework. Okay, so Mitre attack framework is collection of it's generally a collection of attack techniques used by adversaries during breaches. So it consists of and record often breaches which has been done by the adversaries. Okay, this is what the Mitre framework consists of. As I said, tactic, technique, procedures are the three main components of Mitre attack framework. So tactic is considered as an end goal, the ultimate target. Like, what is your ultimate target on this assessment? It's need to be falls under tactic. The techniques, how the goal should be achieved. What are all the techniques you are going to use, and what are the procedure? How you are doing some activity to achieve the technique, to use the technique. These are all the three main components of Mitre. So one sec, I'm just showing a my tray. Yeah. So this is the my attack framework. I guess I hope you all are familiar with that. So I'm just giving an overview. Divide to ultimate section: reconnaissance, resource development, initial access, execution, persistent, red team life cycle. 14 techniques are there. Okay. So so in reconnaissance, it's clear how series are using these specific techniques to compromise. For example, how we can get initial access using some drive-by compromise technique, external phishing. So this is our ultimate goal. My ultimate goal is to get the initial access. There are 9 techniques. How I going to proceed is a procedure. These are all the TTPs. Okay. So these are all the main components.
Sir, you are mute.
Sorry. Am I audible, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sure. So if you are doing some red team assessment, you need to, before starting assessing it, you need to plan a heist. Okay, you need to map every step. Okay, for example, for reconnaissance, I'm just using active scanning. I'm just directly using the active scanning for gathering information. For resource development, in the sense, you like, I'm not more familiar into resource development. Okay, let me skip that. So how are I going to get initial access? I'm just going to use the drive-by compromise techniques, or I just going to use a supply chain compromise technique. I can choose any of the techniques. So I need to choose each and every techniques and procedure before starting my red team assessment. Okay, this is what the mapping is. You can easily use, there are multiple tools to map that. There is a Mitre navigator. You can easily, it's like a mapping stuff. You can easily create a layout. You can map. Okay, for example, I can easily color code that. For example, I just using active scanning. For initial access, I just using phishing. So I can easily color code that. For example, execution, I can use that command and scripting interpreter. So these specific used to map your um, entire red team assessment. So it consists of multiple sub techniques too. So command and scripting interpreter, in the sense, it can be a Python based CLI, it can be a VB based CLI. It can be, there are many sub techniques in that. So you need to dedicate your learning interest towards to explore every stuff. It is mandatory to know all about this stuff to perform a successful red teaming. Okay. So as I said, it's a complicated process. What you need is, you need to spend your time. You need to ultimately spend your most of your time in exploring each and every techniques, and there are more new techniques has been discovered daily. You need to be more familiar with that. So that's why the red team assessment is standing at the top. You need to learn with the step by step process. Okay, so I just created a sample attack map. So you can see there is external website. So I'm just using this specific TTP. If you're searching this TTP on this framework, you can if you paste that, you can clearly see what is this, what is the specific technique. Technique is, okay, it's a external facing application. Sorry. So yeah, sorry. This technique ID is consist of external exploiting. Yeah, T1190 is a exploiting public facing application. So I just using this specific techniques to compromise this website. After getting access in the web, like that web server, I just going to use this three specific tactics, like T105 T. Like, you need to have an entire knowledge in this, so you can map the entire heist before doing the assessment. It is mandatory. So that's why the mapping is more important in red teaming. And this is what I'm just planning to explain in this meet. So I just bit hurried due to the time constraint, or else we can see everything in a practical way. We can actually create some AD environment. We can use the C2 server to escalate on await some techniques. We can practically do that, but the time is too limited because we can't learn an entire teaming in 1 hour. It's been damn sure. So this is what I just planned. So if you're looking for some, if you need some certification, if you're planning, or what is the certification path for red teaming, what I'm suggesting is you can start with these five are main pillars for red teaming certificate. You can start with CRTA, and you can do the CRTP, CRTS, ECPTX, CRTE. So if you are done this five, you are you can be in intermediate level. So I guess these two certification like CRTA and CRTS has been cost less. So CRTA is, I guess it's 5 to 7,000. CRTP is bit costly. You need to spend 30,000, I guess. 25, I guess. CRTS is also bit less compared to other certification. These are all some certification suggestion by me, but there can be a mini path. Okay. So thank you. Just if you have any doubts, just let me know. Because in that entire session, I have skipped that percentage, like viewing the chat. Sorry. There are lots of questions. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, like 0 point security, like CRTO is ultimately. You're asking for that CR 0 point security, right? That CRTO. Yeah, 0 point. It's ultimate. You like it's been hard. Like I just discussed with some of the like already completed star members. They just say it's been somewhat complicated because we don't have a proper guide in it. But if you're completed, it's been a pro. Okay, CRTO is ultimate. For beginner friendly purpose, you can start with CRTA. It's a realistic simulation. CRTA, CRTP, CRTS, even EasyPDX. It's a red team based certification. Red team mainly works on like it's in simple. Red team is a advanced way of pen testing. That's it. So in every organization there are some red team members. They will um, constantly assess their internal organization. Any roadmap, PPT, I will share with that organizer, that Cyberonics teams. So I guess they will share with you. Any roadmap to deep dive. That's what I'm just mentioning. So first start with Mitre. Start exploring Mitre. So you can have a like we can't easily complete this 114 techniques, okay, within a day. It takes lot of time. You need to learn what is reconnaissance, resource development, initial access, execution, persistent. Just learn about every tactics and just start parallelly learn about Active Directory. Okay, you need to have knowledge of bits and bytes of Active Directory, how the Active Directory is working, how they are configuring the Active Directory, these kind of um, knowledge. And you need to know about more security components. What are all the security controls have been implemented in an organization? Because you need to avoid all like they won't for assessment they won't give a excessive privilege. You need to avoid each and every techniques. So it's been our responsibility to that. Sorry, like I don't know about the package because I'm not working as a red teamer, so sorry. Learning these techniques. If you started learning now, within 2 to 3 years, definitely you became an intermediate. That's it. It's actually, but it's also used for team. So if you log into a console, you can see there are multiple consoles, multiple cloud service provider, AWS, GCP, and Azure. You will get with multiple challenges. How we can gather IAM policy in a cloud? How we can gather IAM role? How we can gather IAM group? So these are all the basic reconnaissance. They have the resource. If you're done, you got a certification. So it's a good platform for learning cloud-based teaming. That's what I just suggest. If you're more, you can learn that. I'm just sharing with you. Yeah, it's free. It's totally free. You can, if you're completed every challenge in there, you will get a certification. You can prepare for EC Council. Yeah, like that's what I'm just saying. If you're more into a pen testing, if you're planning to do your penetration testing, you can go with the CH. But red teaming is somewhat advanced. That's what, like if you're targeting a red team based learning, you can go with this, like that course. What I'm suggesting is CRTA, because it's cost friendly. Okay, if you're familiar with this, I guess it's up to 7,000. I guess it's affordable price comparative to other CEH or other certification. It's affordable. What is the main advantage is they replicated that entire. Here you can practice Active Directory based attacks. Like they have an entire briefings, web and network based technology, perform pivoting like lateral movements, Kerberos based attacks. So they will actually give a platform to do a part. So it's like, I don't know the price because yeah. So for Indian, yeah, for 30 days you will charge up to 7,000. You get a PDFs, videos, VPN, kind of multiple stuff. You can start with this. Okay. Actually, I completed my post graduation. Can I start? Yeah, you can actually start. Like that's what I'm just saying. Red teaming is not a beginner friendly stuff. It required a experience. It required more knowledge. So if you started learning from now, after 2 to 3 years, you definitely be in a red team field. That's what I'm just saying. So I'm not suggest this for a beginners or as starters. But if you started learning this, you will definitely in a red team field after 2 to 3 years. And while let team member do phishing activity, yeah, so definitely. So they what Pradeep asks is they will do some multiple techniques, not only a phishing based attack. They do whether they are following their security control. This is what the red team done do is, yeah. Okay, if we cleared OSCP, red team certification required. OSCP. Yeah, OSCP, I guess there is 20% of Active Directory concept in OSCP because I'm not done the OSCP yet. So this certification, which I mentioned, is it's dedicated for a red teaming. So if you take any one of the certification, it's totally based on Active Directory, how the organization infrastructures are. You will come to know about every parts of an offensive approach. That's why I just suggest this certificate. OSCP is typically for pen testing. They are more limited comparative to them. To be damn sure, if you take CRTP, for example, I am just taken the CRTP. So you will get a access on you will get one URL. Okay, that's a web server. You need to compromise the web server initially, and you need to get access to the web server, and you need to literally access to the Active Directory, and you can do lots more stuff. That's what this is the initial. What is the best resource for mastering Active Directory? You can definitely, like what I'm preferred is try hack me. Okay, so in try hack me, I guess there are nearly 4 to 5 Active Directory based challenges like breaching AD, persistent Active Directory. If you are a member, like it's cost up to $10, I guess, for a month. So if you are spend a 700 rupees to 800 rupees for per month, you will get you can easily learn that Active Directory based techniques on try hack me. It's a best resource for Active Directory. To enter into a cybersecurity field, where shall I start first? You can start from this section. uh, yeah, first you need to learn a networking, and you can enter into a SOC. You can move to threat hunting, incident response, forensics, and red team engagement. This is what the life cycle. What I'm hoping it can be. Okay. Anything else? So that's all from my end. So I hope you will have some basic understanding about the rating. Yeah, definitely rating path on Triacme is too worth it. So you will came to know about the entire basic about the rating stuff. Then I totally prefer that as a for a beginner. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the session. And I hope everyone enjoyed your session and gained good knowledge in red teaming. So, guys, you can now leave the session. If you have any doubts, you can stay or else you can leave. We will be having the other sessions from tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be having 5 sessions, and the schedule will be shared in the WhatsApp group. So stay connected and kindly join the meet accordingly. Thank you, everyone. Now you can leave. The PPTs will be shared. The recordings and PPTs will be shared to you through your registered mail and WhatsApp number. Don't worry about that.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful session.
Thank you, sir.